I've seen tiny design mistakes ruin user experience. These tips will save your website by boosting conversions and engagement. Get straight into it with tip number one. You need a clear call to action. You need to show the user what you want them to do. For example, on the Apple homepage, it is obvious that the action they want you to take is to either learn more or to buy. So they've put buy a little bit less prominent and learn more is the most prominent because they know that you're not likely to buy when you first land on their homepage. Something else to notice is that all over the screen you can click and it'll take you to the learn more page. And if I click learn more, it takes me to this iPhone 17 Pro page and the main action is buy. So you can tell that Apple is showing the user what they want you to do. Less content is usually better. It makes the call to action more obvious. It saves time in design and development, and it helps to reduce the amount of time it takes before you get user feedback. I'd recommend designing mobile first, which means you design for a mobile before you create a desktop design. This helps with simplicity and it makes responsiveness really easy to build in. Get feedback early and often. You don't need to wait until it's public before you get user feedback. Get quality feedback on the usability of your site with effective user testing techniques. The first of these techniques is think aloud, where you get the user to think out loud as they are using your site. The second is task-based, where you give them a task you wish them to complete. Third is first click, where you check that the first click that they make is the one that you expected them to and the one that you wanted them to. Card sorting or tree testing, where you check that the navigation is as one would expect. You can do A/B testing. I wouldn't recommend doing this before you get at least thousands of page views per month. Visual hierarchy. This can be used to guide the user to the most important information or action on the page. Some techniques are size, where bigger is more important and smaller is less important. Color, where higher saturation is more important and lower saturation is less important. Contrast, where higher contrast is more important and lower contrast is less important. Alignment, where in the West, left is typically more important and right is usually read last or noticed last. Repetition, where consistency makes for better looking content and more predictable interactions. Proximity, where closer means that two elements are more related, and if they're further apart or more distant, then they are usually less related. One or two fonts should be sufficient for most websites, and you should have a clear rule for when to use each font. For example, one font could be used specifically for numbers, while you have another font for text. Design interactive elements. Interactive elements have more than one state. For instance, if you hover over a button, it tends to change how it looks. I recommend designing in every state. Design phase accessibility. Contrast. Text needs to be readable regardless of what background it is on. The WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines specify whether the text is readable based on the color of the background and the color of the text. Font sizes. I recommend just making sure that the font sizes are big enough for anyone to be able to read. I recommend using rem units instead of pixels because rem units scale based on the user's browser settings. Certain color choices will be more beneficial to people with color blindness. The Web Content Accessibility Guideline also specifies that the color can't be used as the only way of conveying information, so I recommend pairing it with something else, like a cursor change. Build phase accessibility. Semantic HTML. This means you need to use HTML tags for their intended purpose. Don't just use a div for everything. If you don't use semantic HTML, you need to replicate functionality of native elements inside whatever element you replace it with. So if you replace a button with a div, you need to make sure that the div behaves like a normal HTML button. Use labels for inputs. Use alt text for images. Check that the libraries that you use are accessible. Even if you're 100% on top of your own code, make sure that any libraries that you import also are accessible. Your communication needs to be clear and simple. Users don't know as much about your product as you do. Don't use internal jargon to explain your product to your users. They won't understand. Don't build and design at the same time. It's important to realize that when you're in the design mindset, it's a lot easier to design a good website than it is when you're writing code. The only possible exception to this is no-code website builders, where you can kind of design and build at the same time because building is basically designing. Don't get too caught up in reading or scanning patterns. You might have seen a lot of design advice recommending the F or Z patterns. I would recommend you don't worry about this too much. Forcing your content into a scanning pattern will likely lead to a worse result than you'd get if you simply follow the tips in this video. If your template already comes in a pattern like that, that's fine. You don't have to undo it. Just don't try and stress too much about fitting that exact pattern. Many good websites don't follow it. Research similar sites for inspiration. You can use siteinspire.com to look up different examples of good web design. Use common elements. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. This saves time, and common elements are tried and tested, so you don't have to worry about whether your users will understand how they work. You can find good quality icons at fonts.google.com/icons. Equally, you can find good fonts at fonts.google.com. You don't have to create your own. Use a UI library if you don't need control. For example, Material UI, Mantine, ShadCN, and there's an absolute bucket load of these libraries that you can use so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can get free and copyright-free stock images from pixabay.com, and you can also get sounds from pixabay.com or from freesound.org. I stress that you choose the right technology for the job. This could be a whole video in itself. There's no silver bullet, but you've got to make sure that the technology you're choosing is not going to make life harder for you and that it's going to help you accomplish the goal that you're trying to aim for with the project that you're doing. It's okay to use a no-code web builder. If the application suits it, don't be ashamed about using a no-code platform. There are some really good ones out there nowadays. It's also okay to use a template. If you're using a no-code builder, you can find free templates as well as paid templates. Or if you're writing the code yourself, you can find a bunch of templates on GitHub and other resources. I recommend you start looking at different templates to speed things up. Or if you like the control, you can build your own template and start from that instead of starting from scratch every time you create a new project. It's good to know the basics of search engine optimization if it's important for your project. So the most important things are your H1 or your main header, your H2 or your second most important heading, and the meta tags. Equally, backlinks are super important, which means links from other websites to your website. And if you really care about SEO, I would definitely include that in your decision making about which technology to use to build the website. Something like React is probably not so great for SEO. Make sure you test on multiple screen sizes to make sure that your website is responsive. You also want to check that it works on multiple browsers such as Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera. The list goes on, but those are probably the most important ones. It's also good to check that your website adjusts to different browser font sizes. by opening up the settings and changing the browser font size. The final tip, and probably the most important tip, is to actually publish your website. You've put so much work into it. Don't wait until a year from now until you finally realize, wait, I never ended up publishing it because I was too scared or didn't think it was going to succeed. Just put it out there. It's going to do better out in public than it will if you never publish it. Don't let that anxiety and fear stop you from taking that last step. It's the most important one, and none of the other tips matter if you don't actually publish your website. I really hope you got some value out of these tips. If you found it a little bit overwhelming, that's okay. It's meant to be rapid fire. Choose some to work on and then revisit it later to see how you're tracking. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. See you in the next video.